June the 11th. Before we launch into the devotion, I do want to ask you today to be praying for David and for Connie Liptrap. We're in 2 Corinthians chapter 12 today. And I guess in some degrees, I feel like I should look at another part of the chapter other than where I'm going to look. Because where I'm looking is typically, if somebody is preaching from 2 Corinthians chapter 12, it's where the focus goes to. And it's not that I don't think the rest of the chapter is important. It's, I don't know, just the message in here in 2 Corinthians chapter 12, beginning with verse 7. I just think it can apply to every one of our lives in such immense ways. Earlier, Paul has been talking about how he was called up into paradise to the third heaven and how he heard things that were even inexpressible, unlawful for him to utter. So as we go into the 7th verse, Paul makes this statement. Lest I should be exalted, lifted up above measure because of the abundance of revelations. I think there's a truth here that sometimes the more God shows to a person, for lack of better terms, maybe the more somebody is lifted up as a spiritual leader or whatnot, there is a great danger that pride can enter in. As I was talking to Matt about Sunday, and we're about to wrap up, we've been through 1 Corinthians and 2 Corinthians. I think Matt is probably going to speak out of these books about the whole danger of pride and the need for humility. And Paul had experienced things that very few people had ever experienced. And he said, God had allowed him to see these things, to be called up into paradise and hear things that was unlawful for him to even express. And because of that, so that he would not become prideful, that he would not become arrogant, by the abundance of the revelations, a thorn in the flesh was given to me, a messenger of Satan to buffet me, to beat me. And I want to tell you, this passage can mess with some of our theology. I don't have all the answers here. Because, a lot of times we bind the devil and we rebuke the devil and we do this and we do that. But I don't know how we get around this, that Paul was saying a messenger of Satan was given. And who gave it to him? God did, to keep him from being elevated too high, to become full of pride. And he says it again, lest I should be exalted above measure. He says that twice. That ought to be a warning to us. The more the Lord shows us, the more we grow in the Lord, to guard our hearts against pride. And so Paul understood this had been given to him to keep him from going to this place of pride, of thinking he was above others. And he says of this, though, I pleaded with the Lord 3 times that he might take it away from me. Now again, is there a man who understood prayer? Is there a man who walked with God? Yes, it was Paul. Yet he pleaded with the Lord 3 times. Instead of taking it away, the Lord said to him, my grace is sufficient for you. For my strength is made perfect in weakness. I want us to think about that for just a moment. My grace is sufficient for you. When I read that, it takes me back to John chapter 1. In the beginning was the Word was with God, the Word was God. Verse 14, the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. We beheld the glory of the only begotten of the Father, full of grace and truth. And then he goes on in verse 16, and of his fullness we have all received, and grace for grace. I think when he says my grace is sufficient for you, I think he says my presence is sufficient for you. I am the one who is filled with grace. Therefore, Paul, in the midst of what is happening, even this messenger from Satan buffeting you, my presence is sufficient for you, and my strength, not your strength, but my strength is made perfect in weakness. And then Paul goes on to say some other things that I think a lot of times as Christians we wrestle with. Most gladly, I would rather boast in my infirmities, that the power of Christ may rest upon me. Therefore, I take pleasure in infirmities and reproaches and needs and persecutions and distresses. Because again, many times in the body of Christ, depending on which maybe flavor you hang with, there's some teaching that all of this, if you're spiritual, this stuff won't happen to you. Well, Paul said God was using it in his life, and he said he had even learned to glory in these things, because in these things, it was not his strength that he depended upon, but it was the strength of the Lord. I even think today, in the day of where there is, the church has become so much out, I'm doing this. I'm online. Thousands and thousands and thousands of ministries are online. And we give so much focus to personalities and what great orators they are and what great singers they are and this and that. And I'm not saying that is necessarily wrong, but I'm saying here that Paul was not glorying in his strengths. He was glorying in his weaknesses, that the power of Christ may rest upon him. I want to say to you, brothers and sisters, it may be in your weakness and not in your strengths that God is glorified in your life. Hope this helps you today. God bless you.